Hello there,
and welcome to our catio.
In this 3-part short series, we will try to show you how we built this catio. From pouring the slab to installing the electronics that makes this catio a smart catio. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you'll know when the next part is up.
Our goal is to show you and inspire you to do similar things, especially in the stress time when we're instructed to stay home. We made few mistakes during this build. We will try to explain some of them and what we would do differently so you can learn from our mistakes.
One last thing before we begin. I love to learn new things. As part of this project, I learned about concrete, welding, angle grinder, irrigation systems, and much more. If you are a subscriber and watched any of my previous videos, you probably know that this is not the bread and butter for me. So please don't take my work as an example of the best way to perform the task. Most of the thing you see here was our first try. Now with this heavy disclaimer,
What an ass!
Now with that heavy disclaimer, let's begin. I started by making a rough drawing of the way I want this catio to look like. I gotta say that I've done a lot of improvising on the way, and this is the first thing I would like you to avoid. Plan a solid and clear plan before you start. The build time will be shorter and you will encounter obstacles less often. This is the garden the catio is going to be in. The cats can get in and out through our bedroom window. The terrain in this point is horrible. As you can see, the ground is full of spikes. The first step was to break the surface using shovel and flatten everything using a rake. Unfortunately, I've lost the footage of me doing that. I decided to start with the concrete slab and shape everything around it. I used the plasterboard profiles leftovers as frame for the concrete slab. I've positioned it in place using steel bars. The front edge will be 1 meter from the back, or 39.3 inches. I then use the grass delimiter to shape the round side of the concrete. I use sand and steel bars to anchor it in place. This is extremely important because the concrete puts a lot of pressure on the plastic grass delimiter. If you will not put enough support, the concrete will push the grass delimiter and destroy all of your hard work. The next step is to cover the ground with plastic sheet. The reason we do it is because the ground will suck all of the moisture from the concrete and dry it out too fast. If that happens, the concrete strength can be compromised and it may crack. For a good strong concrete, I've built a steel bar net. This will add a strength to the concrete and help avoid cracks. I first mark the size of each bar since the shape is irregular. Then cut the steel bars to the marked size. I then cut the plastic sheet to the right size and position stones that will hold the steel net few centimeters above the ground. Now for the concrete. The concrete I've purchased is not pre-mixed, so the recipe for it is 3 units of gravel, 2 units of sand, and 1 unit of the concrete itself. I then mix the dry materials carefully. Next, I added water to the mix. I've started with small amount of water. After all, this is the first time I've mixed concrete, so it was kind of a test. I then added water until I got the correct consistency. I didn't think it through and mixed the very heavy concrete around 10 meters from the pouring zone. So I had to do some back and forth heavy lifting from the mixing zone to the pouring zone. I then poured the concrete into the template. That was exhausting, but lesson learned.
Hello, kitty.
I then squeezed the concrete using my leg to fill the template. The next mix was done just by the pouring zone, so it went much easier. After 3 or 4 mixes, I got to the height I wanted. As you can probably notice, the last mix was more diluted with water. It later caused some problems with the top layer. More on that later. The last step for that day was to smoothen the surface using a screed. I'm not a concrete expert, but I think this looks pretty good. We wanted to give the concrete something to make it unique. After all, not all slabs gets to serve such a superior purpose, like being in a catio. We've printed a cat paw out of Thingiverse and pressed it to the concrete. After around 72 hours of curing, the moment of truth, removing the template and revealing the concrete. It's important to mention that I've kept the concrete moist most of the time while I was waiting for it to cure. Not too bad for a first time. Remember I told you earlier that the last pour was too diluted with water? I think that this is the reason why the concrete was crumbled, but yet it looks nice. I then removed the last profile from the back side of the slab. We pressed the cat paw to the concrete too long after pouring the concrete. Plus, the top surface crumbled, so unfortunately there is no reminder to the paw. The edges of the concrete was sticking out a bit, so I've sanded it flat using an orbit sander machine. I also sanded the rough edges and wavy pattern on the sides off camera. This, by the way, caused by the concrete resting on the grass delimiter. Now let's move on to the water fountain structure. While I was still waiting for the concrete to fully cure, I've dug the hole for the water fountain and the piping for it and for the garden. No, this is not the time to lay the grass yet, but the grass size was the element that determined the size of the catio. I bought a 4 by 5 meters of grass, which translates into 4.3 by 5.4 yards. I laid it down so I know where to position the steel bars that will hold the fence. I measure around 2 meters maximum range between each bar to create a strong structure. I've measured and marked the length of the bar that should be under the ground to result in a 2-meter high fence. Each bar is 2.5 meters, so I marked 50 centimeters from the bottom. I then placed the first bar in the ground using kind of an hammer that is used specifically for this purpose. This was the moment I realized these bars are very flimsy and are not stable. The fence will put a lot of stress on these bars. This specific bar is located near the soon-to-be gate, so I didn't worry about it too much, because the gate will provide stability in this part of the catio. But for all other bars, I needed to come up with a different strategy. I used the force of the water hose to dig holes in the ground. That's a nice way to dig without the heavy lifting. Next, I welded steel rods to the steel bar to make more contact with the soil. I'm not sure how helpful it was to make it more stable, but I just got the welder and I needed something to practice my unexisting welding skills. We then painted the welding with metal color, so it won't rust anytime soon. For the next step in the new strategy, I needed to mix some more concrete. It is much easier to mix concrete in small quantities. I stuck the bars into the ground while my wife was holding it in the correct position. This is what you'll get when you ask your wife to help. Now just pour in the concrete inside the hole and make sure it got to all of the cracks. I then did the same for all of the other rods. The black rods doesn't fit the theme of the catio, so we cleaned it with acetone and removed any contaminants and painted it in white color. I did the second coat of paint off camera, so don't worry about it. Next, we redo the terrain again and flatten it as much as we could. Now let's move the focus to the garden. I used steel rods leftovers to mark the all I need to do for the garden and dug the hole. I then mixed garden soil with the existing soil to make it easy for the plants to grow. I did the same for the cat litter hole, except here I needed to make the hole as accurate as possible and flat. I used water to turn it into mud and waited for it to dry into shape. Meanwhile, I started cutting the grass where appropriate. To be honest, I've cut the grass above the concrete long time ago, I just had to see how it looks. Next, I've cut the garden hole. Then the water fountain hole, using the vase which was underneath it to help me make sure I'm in the correct position. I then removed the grass from the vase, took the vase out, and put the grass back on. I made some final cuts in the grass in order for it to fit perfectly. Back at the cat litter hole, I've stuck steel anchors to the ground that will hold the grass in place while I'll cut it. I've located where the hole begins and started cutting. The hole I'm making now will later hold all of the cat litter. Now, this is one of my mistakes. I've planted the plants because I really wanted the cat grass seeds to be fully grown for the video. But I didn't take into consideration that I still need to apply a black mesh nylon between the grass and the ground, and also put the fence on. The white and pink flowers are for aesthetic purposes only, but the seeds are cat grass that the cats love. The plant at the front is Nepeta cataria, which you probably know as catnip. The final step was to install the irrigation hoses. These hoses have a special droppers that irrigates the garden.
Thank you for watching this far. If you enjoyed the video, please give it thumbs up.
It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. In the next part, we will set the fence and the grass, the wood logs, build the water fountain, restore the bench we're sitting on, and much more. Don't forget to subscribe to be notified when the next part is out. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.